My name is Jason Laird. I've been section hiking the Appalachian Trail for nearly 15 years now, logged over 200 miles across 6 states. I know how to read weather patterns from cloud formations, how to find water in drought conditions, how to navigate without a compass if needed. I'm telling you this because what happened near Gregory Bald wasn't the mistake of some weekend warrior who got spooked by shadows or wildlife. I know what I saw. This was back in the fall of 2015. Early October. The leaves were just starting to turn. That perfect window between summer crowds and winter cold. I'd taken a week off work to tackle the section through the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, from Fontana Dam up through Clingman's Dome and beyond. The Smokies are special. There's a reason they call them that. The way the mist rises between those ancient peaks, how the light filters through it at dawn and dusk. It's like nowhere else on the trail. My 3rd day in, I'd reached Gregory Bald, this incredible high-elevation clearing surrounded by ridgelines in every direction. Perfect campsite. You can see for miles up there when the weather's clear. I'd made good time, arrived around 4 p.m. with plenty of daylight left to set up camp and cook before sunset. I remember checking the clouds as I pitched my tent. My grandfather, he was half Cherokee, taught me how to read the weather from the sky. Flat bottoms mean fair weather. Ragged edges bring rain, he'd say. The clouds that evening were high and wispy. Good weather ahead. He had other sayings too. The ridges watch longer than we do. I always took that as poetry, you know. Just a nice way of saying the mountains have been here longer than us. I didn't realize it was a warning. I was taking sunset photos when I first noticed it. A tall, thin silhouette standing on a far ridge to the west, completely motionless. Just a black shape against the reddening sky. At first, I thought nothing of it. Another hiker enjoying the view, maybe a park ranger. I even waved. No response. I dug my binoculars out of my pack for a better look. That's when things first felt wrong. Through the lenses, I could make out more details than I expected. It stood at least 7 feet tall, with disproportionately long limbs and an oddly sloped back. The shoulders were too broad and hunched forward, giving it a predatory posture. What struck me most was how it blended with the tree line. Its skin or fur, I couldn't tell which, matched the exact shade of the shadowed forest behind it. Perfect camouflage, except for its height that put it above the brush. And where the face should have been, 2 faint points reflected the dying sunlight. Like eyes, but larger than human eyes should be. More like the eye shine you'd see in nocturnal animals, but active in daylight. As I watched, it suddenly moved. Not the casual stroll of a hiker, but a fluid, rapid motion along the ridgeline. It covered about 30 yards in seconds, moving with long, bounding strides that seemed perfectly adapted to the uneven terrain. Then it stopped again, resuming that unnatural stillness. I put my binoculars away, feeling uneasy. When I glanced back a few minutes later, it was gone. I told myself it was just another hiker who'd continued on the trail. But something about the way it moved, too fast, too smooth over rough ground, stuck with me. As darkness fell, I kept scanning the ridgelines. Nothing. But the forest felt different somehow. The usual night sounds, insects, distant owls, the rustle of small animals, seemed muted, as if everything was listening rather than making noise. I decided I'd hike across the valley at first light, check out that ridge where I'd seen the figure. Maybe there was some explanation that would make sense. I woke sometime after midnight. The stars were incredibly clear, no clouds, no moon yet, but something had woken me. A sound, branches cracking, stones shifting from the western slope. Something large moving through the underbrush. I grabbed my headlamp and stepped outside my tent. That's when I saw it again. Closer this time, maybe 500 yards away, standing at the tree line at the edge of the clearing. The same tall silhouette. My lamp caught those reflective eyes. 2 large amber discs that flared with light, then narrowed as if adjusting to the beam. It stood completely still, but I could see now it was breathing. Slow, deep movements of its broad chest. I killed the light immediately and retreated to my tent. I didn't sleep again that night. Dawn brought dense fog, not unusual in the Smokies, but the timing felt deliberate. I packed up quickly and started hiking, taking the trail that would lead down and across the valley. The fog limited visibility to maybe 50 feet in any direction. I felt safer in it, hidden from whatever had been watching me. About a mile down the trail, I found the first physical evidence. Large footprints in a muddy section, Elongated, narrow prints with 4 distinct toes and what looked like a hooked claw at the heel. Not human, not bear. Nothing I recognized from my years on the trail. The stride length was enormous, nearly 6 feet between prints, suggesting it could cover ground with incredible speed. Near the tracks, I noticed something caught on a thorny bush. Several coarse, dark hairs about 6 inches long, too thick for deer or bear fur, more like bristles than hair, with a strange, iridescent quality when they caught the light. I carefully collected a few in a Ziploc bag, telling myself I'd show them to a ranger later. The fog began to thin as I descended toward the valley floor. Every 100 yards or so, I'd stop and scan the surrounding forest. Twice, I caught glimpses of movement, that same tall figure moving parallel to my path, always keeping distance, but clearly following my route. It no longer mirrored me exactly, but seemed to be tracking me, using the trees for cover, but occasionally visible when crossing open spaces. Each time I spotted it, it was closer than before. 500 yards, 300, 200, never approaching directly, but gradually closing the distance as the day progressed. I picked up my pace, checking my map for the quickest route to the nearest ranger station. The forest felt wrong, too quiet, too still. Even the wind seemed to avoid this section of woods. Around midday, I stopped at a small stream to refill my water. That's when I noticed the disturbance across the clearing. Branches broken at an unnatural height, about 8 feet up, snapped downward as if something tall had pushed through. Bark was scraped off several trees, exposing fresh wood beneath. Something large had passed this way recently, and with force. I quickly finished filtering my water and continued downhill, moving faster now. The sense of being followed intensified. Twice I heard the crack of branches behind me, then to my left, then ahead, as if something was circling my position. In a small clearing, I turned suddenly, hoping to catch sight of whatever was stalking me. There it was, not on the distant ridge now, but among the trees about 100 yards back. In the daylight, I could see more clearly what I'd only glimpsed before. It stood upright on 2 legs, but nothing like a human stance. Its limbs were disproportionately long, with knees and elbows that seemed to have extra joints. The torso was lean but powerfully built, with muscles visible beneath a covering that wasn't quite fur and wasn't quite skin, something in between, modeled in patterns that matched the forest floor perfectly. Its head was elongated, with a pronounced brow ridge that shadowed those reflective eyes. As I stared, it moved, not away, but sideways, circling to my flank with that same fluid motion I'd seen on the ridge. It used the trees for cover, moving from trunk to trunk with deliberate steps. Each movement was silent despite its size, feet finding purchase on rocky ground without dislodging a single stone. I turned and ran. No hesitation, no attempt to look brave. Pure instinct took over. I sprinted down the trail, abandoning any pretense of careful hiking. Behind me, I heard the rapid thud of something large keeping pace. Near the valley bottom, I had to cross a rocky stream bed. As I picked my way across the slippery stones, I heard a heavy splash upstream, something entering the water maybe 30 yards away. I glanced up just in time to see it emerge on the bank, water shedding off that mottled skin, muscles bunching as it pulled itself up the embankment with those long, powerful arms. It moved on all fours here, covering ground faster than any human could run. Then it rose again to its full height, watching as I scrambled up the opposite bank. It made no sound, no call or growl, just that focused, predatory attention. I reached the main trail and spotted a group of day hikers ahead. 3 people with day packs, chatting loudly. I've never been so relieved to see strangers. I jogged up to them, breathing hard, trying not to sound completely unhinged as I asked how far to the ranger station. When I glanced back to the stream crossing, nothing was there. Just empty forest and dancing shadows. I stayed with the hikers all the way to the visitor center near Fontana Dam. I was dehydrated, exhausted, probably incoherent. When the ranger asked what happened, I tried to rationalize it, told them I'd seen something unusual on the ridges, showed them the hair samples and described the footprints. The ranger looked concerned and said they'd check it out, but I could tell he thought I'd encountered a bear and panicked. There was an elderly volunteer at the center that day. Cherokee man, had to be in his 80s. He'd been silent while I talked, just listening. When I finished, he asked to see the hairs I'd collected. He rolled them between his fingers, held them to the light to see that iridescent quality, and nodded slowly. The old people called them Yunwitsunsdi, he said quietly. The Ridge Watchers. They've been in these mountains longer than we have. They don't want much, just to be left alone. I asked him what they were. Not what they were called, but what they were. He considered this for a long time. They're just another kind of people, he finally said. Mountain people. Different from us. Stronger, faster, better suited to this land than we'll ever be. He handed the hairs back to me. If one follows you, don't look back at it. They take that as a challenge. Just keep walking. I didn't ask him anything else. I think I already knew what he meant. That night, in a motel room in Bryson City, I examined those strange hairs again. Under the bright bathroom light, I could see they weren't black as I'd first thought, but a deep indigo blue that caught the light in waves. I still have them, sealed in that Ziploc bag. I haven't hiked that section since. But last summer, I was on a different trail, different mountain range entirely. As sunset approached, I found myself scanning the western ridge. Just habit now. It was empty at first glance. Then, as the sun lowered, I noticed broken branches high up on a tree at the ridgeline, swaying as if recently disturbed. I turned away immediately and kept walking, faster this time. Didn't look back. My grandfather was right. The ridges do watch longer than we do. They were watching before the first trails were cut, before the first footsteps crossed these mountains. And they're still watching now. If you're hiking in the Smokies, especially near Gregory Bald, and you spot a tall figure moving through the trees or standing on a distant ridge, don't wave to it. Don't photograph it. And whatever you do, don't run. Just keep walking, eyes forward. Some things in these mountains are better left undisturbed. My name is Evan Miles. I'm just a weekend backpacker. Been doing it for about 8 years now. Nothing special. Just a guy who likes getting away from the city noise. Taking some nature photos for my blog. I've hiked most of the major trails in the southeast. Know enough to pack right and stay safe. At least I thought I did. What happened in Deep Creek last October, I still can't explain it. Not in a way that makes sense. Not in a way anyone believes. I'd planned this solo trip for months. A 4-day hike through the Deep Creek drainage basin in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It's this remote, humid area where the valleys stay shrouded in mist most mornings. Perfect for the foggy time lapses I wanted to capture. I'd read up on the area, knew the trails, understood the basic wildlife patterns. Black bears are common there. So I kept my food sealed and hung properly at night. Standard procedure. The first day went exactly as planned. Weather was cool but clear. Trails were empty. Tourist season was winding down. I made good time to my first campsite. Set up before sunset. Managed to get some great golden hour shots of the valley. Sound carries strangely there. You can hear footsteps echo when there's nothing for them to bounce off of. It creates this weird acoustic bubble where distant noises feel close and close ones feel distant. I noted it in my journal that night, thinking it would make for interesting audio recordings. On the second day, about 2 miles into my hike, I found something odd in the mud near a stream crossing. 4 long indentations, like fingers pressed backward into the soil. My first thought was bear tracks, maybe a forepaw dragging strangely. I took a photo, thinking I'd check my wildlife guide later, maybe post it online to see if anyone could identify it. I continued deeper into the basin, following the creek. That afternoon, I stumbled upon something genuinely bizarre. A raccoon carcass, completely cleaned. And I don't mean eaten, I mean cleaned. The skeleton was perfectly intact, not a bone out of place, but there wasn't a scrap of muscle or tissue left. The skin was peeled away in one piece, lying beside it like an empty glove. No bite marks, no tearing, nothing to indicate how it had been emptied. The strangest part was the ground around it, noticeably colder than the surrounding area. Despite the warm afternoon sun, I put my hand on the soil and pulled back immediately. It felt like touching the inside of a refrigerator. That's when I heard it for the first time. This exhale, not quite a growl, not a sigh, but this hollow groaning sound that seemed to come through the trees themselves, like wind through a pipe. But there was no wind that day. The air was dead still. I told myself it was just trapped air escaping from rock crevices. That happens in karst terrain sometimes. Or maybe 2 trees rubbing together, amplified by the basin's weird acoustics. I documented the carcass, made a joke about finding the world's neatest bear for my blog followers, and continued on. That night at camp, I was reviewing the day's photos when I noticed something in the background of one frame. Behind the tree line, maybe 70 yards back, there was this pale, arched shape. I zoomed in as much as I could. It looked almost like, well, like the outline of something standing upright, but wrong somehow. Its back rose too high, curved like a question mark, and the limbs seemed jointed in reverse. I was still trying to make sense of it when I heard that same hollow groan outside my tent. Low, rhythmic, almost synchronized with my breathing pattern. I grabbed my flashlight and camera, thinking it might be a bear. I'd get a great shot for the blog. But when I stepped outside, there was nothing visible. Just fog rolling between the trees and this faint smell of, it's hard to describe, like rust and spoiled meat, but fainter, carried uphill on air that wasn't moving. On impulse, I set up my tripod facing the direction of the sound, clicking the shutter for a 30-second exposure. When I checked the result, all I caught was a blur retreating between trees, a smear of pale movement, too fast for the long exposure. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I broke camp early. Something felt off about the forest. Too quiet. No birds calling, no insects buzzing. Even my footsteps sounded muffled, like the air was absorbing sound. I decided to hike toward higher ground, thinking I'd feel better with some elevation and visibility. The groan returned as I walked, always behind me, but fainter now. Each time I stopped to listen, it stopped too. I tried an experiment. I clapped my hands once, hard, listening for the echo. Instead of my clap bouncing back, that hollow exhale answered from the trees. Halfway up the trail, I found those same backward handprints crossing my path. The soil was disturbed in a way I'd never seen, as if something had dragged itself sideways across the ground. But the pattern wasn't random. It curved, arcing around my position like something had deliberately circled to flank me. That's when the fear really hit. Whatever was making these tracks wasn't just passing through. It was following me, tracking me. I picked up my pace, keeping my camera ready. The forest felt wrong, emptied out, like every living thing had cleared away. The fog thickened as afternoon faded to twilight, limiting visibility to maybe 30 feet. I reached a narrow creek bed choked with mist, and that's where I saw it. Across the water, standing upright, tall, gaunt, its ribcage visibly expanding and contracting beneath skin, stretched too tight. I froze, unable to move or call out. The thing lowered itself to all fours, moving with this fluid, impossible motion. Its knees bending backward, spine flexing like it had twice the vertebrae of any animal I'd ever seen. When it exhaled, its entire torso seemed to collapse inward, releasing that flute-toned groan. I felt the sound vibrate through the ground, up through my boots and into my bones. Then it did something I still can't explain. It moved between two trees growing so close together that I couldn't have squeezed my arm between them. The bones along its spine flexed, folding almost accordion-like as it slipped through the gap. I snapped a photo reflexively. The flash went off, briefly illuminating it. This skeletal, eyeless face turning toward the light, hollow sockets reflecting nothing. Then it vanished into the fog, with a sound like ice cracking on a frozen lake. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran until my lungs burned, following the trail markers back toward the ranger station. I didn't stop until I reached my car. When I got home, I immediately checked the photos. Most were too blurred by motion, but one, the flash photo, showed enough. A bone-thin silhouette, limbs too long, spine arched impossibly high beneath taut skin. No fur, no visible eyes, just this thing that shouldn't exist. I posted it online, claiming I'd documented something wrong with the bear population in the Smokies. The response was instant and brutal. People called it an obvious Photoshop job, said I was attention-seeking, accused me of faking wildlife photos. The next morning, the post was flagged and removed for graphic content. My account was flooded with messages calling me a hoaxer, a liar. I deleted everything. My posts, my account, everything. But I kept the raw file on my hard drive. Sometimes I still look at it, zoom in on that outline. It still makes me feel sick to my stomach. A few weeks later, I was browsing a local hiking forum when I came across mentions of the starved man, apparently a campfire story told in the Smokies. The description matched what I had seen, a skeletal, long-limbed creature that moves with an unnatural gait and makes a hollow groaning sound. The story warns campers, don't stay too long where hunger listens. It's not just a story to me anymore. I know what I saw. Last month, I found myself driving back toward Deep Creek. I can't explain why. Some need to prove to myself that it was real, I guess. I had my camera on the passenger seat, fully charged. About 5 miles from the trailhead, my car stereo suddenly cut out. For several seconds, a low, hollow note hummed through the speakers, the same groaning sound from the woods. Then it faded, and the radio came back. I turned around. Didn't make it to the trailhead that day. But I've got the trip planned again for next month. Better equipment this time, better evidence. I know it's still out there. The hollowback, the thing the mountains hide, and I think it remembers me too. I've been a backcountry ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 14 years. Started as seasonal staff, worked my way up to senior backcountry officer for the Alum Cave Bluffs sector. Wildlife tracking, patrol coordination, visitor management. That's been my life. I know these mountains. At least, I thought I did. This happened back in October 2018. We'd had unusual weather patterns, temperature inversions creating these dense fog pockets along the ridges. Nothing dangerous, just atmospheric oddities we'd note in our daily reports. I mention this because it matters. The air behaves differently in those conditions. I was reviewing visitor logs when 2 separate complaints came in the same week. Both hikers reported hearing a man whistling near the same ridge at dusk. Same description, 4 notes, rising pattern. Both hikers said the sound seemed to follow them. I didn't think much of it initially. Sound carries strangely through the bluffs. We've documented this extensively. The curved rock formations create natural amplifiers, and thermal updrafts can make echoes drift in ways that seem unnatural if you don't understand the science. I decided to check it out on my evening patrol. Standard procedure: document any unusual activity, rule out poachers, ensure visitor safety. I packed my gear: GPS, radio, parabolic mic for wildlife sampling, thermal camera, headlamp, basic kit. The trail was quiet that evening. Too quiet, actually. Pause. That should have been my first warning. Usually you've got ambient noise, wind through pines, small mammals rustling in undergrowth, birds settling in for the night. But as I approached the ridge, everything just stopped. That's when I heard it. A whistle, thin, almost crystalline, 4 distinct notes in a rising pattern. It came from the eastern slope, maybe half a mile out. I pulled out my decibel meter to measure directionality. The reading made no sense. The sound registered from the east, but the terrain shouldn't have allowed sound propagation from that direction. Solid rock faces blocked direct transmission. I followed the ridgeline toward the source. The whistle came again, same 4 notes, but now from behind me. I turned, confused. No one was there. I checked my GPS coordinates and noted the discrepancy in my log. Probably just an acoustic anomaly, I thought. Sound bouncing off the bluff face, redirected by temperature gradients. That's when I found the first tracks. On the north side of the trail, bare human footprints, adult-sized, pressed into the clay. Normal depth, normal stride pattern. But on the south side, these gouges, not animal tracks I recognized, elongated impressions, like something with claws had dragged itself forward, creating parallel furrows in the soil. 2 completely different track patterns, perfectly alternating across the trail. I photographed them, took measurements. My first hypothesis: a human with some kind of prosthetic or injury. Asymmetrical gait causing unusual impressions. Logical explanation. I continued my patrol. The following day, I assembled a volunteer search team, standard procedure for investigating unusual visitor reports. 5 experienced hikers, each with recording equipment. We split up to cover more ground. That evening, my radio crackled. 2 volunteers reported hearing the whistle near the upper bluffs. When we regrouped, I reviewed their GoPro footage. That's clear's throat. That's when things stopped making sense. The footage clearly captured the 4-note whistle, but it continued even as all team members were accounted for on camera. None of them were making the sound. I decided to hike out alone that night with better equipment. Professional curiosity, or stubbornness maybe. I brought a high-sensitivity parabolic microphone to capture and triangulate the sound. At 9:17 p.m., the whistle came again. I recorded a clean sample, crisp and clear in the night air. But when I played it back through my monitoring headphones, the pattern was inverted, like it was being reflected back from a moving source. I stayed out past curfew, following the sound, taking readings at different elevations. The tracks appeared again, Human footprints alternating with those strange claw marks. I followed them to a bare rock ledge where they simply stopped. No scuff marks indicating someone had jumped. No evidence they'd turned around. The prints just ended at solid rock. On my second night out, everything changed. The whistle began behind me, those same 4 notes, then immediately sounded again from ahead of me, then beside me. The sound wasn't echoing. It was anticipating my movements. When I turned north, it was already there, waiting. When I doubled back, it appeared on the path ahead. I climbed a switchback, thinking I could get a better vantage point. The whistle was already at the top before I made it halfway up. My radio started crackling with static, and through the white noise came that same 4-note pattern. Identical pitch, identical timing. This wasn't an echo. Something was broadcasting it. Looking down into the hollow, I saw it, just for a second. A tall, gray figure walking backward along the trail. Its head was tilted slightly, like it was listening. It made no sound that I could hear, yet the whistle continued. When I moved, it mirrored me from a distance, then vanished into the fog bank. I know how this sounds. I've documented hundreds of wildlife encounters. I understand the difference between observation and imagination, but what I saw violated every natural law I understand. Near midnight, I set up my final recording station. The whistle began normally, then answered itself. 2 identical sources creating an overlapping stereo effect, circling my position. I switched to my thermal camera and caught a heat signature. Vertical, taller than human, moving smoothly along the cliffside. But the temperature reading was wrong, colder than the ambient rock around it. Nothing living registers that way. The whistle then changed. It dropped in frequency until I couldn't hear it anymore, but I could feel it, a deep vibration in my chest with each pulse. The trees around me trembled with the resonance. I turned on my headlamp, swept the beam across the darkness. For just an instant, the light caught something, a faceless, ashen gray form standing motionless among the trees, taller than any man I've ever seen. The air around it seemed to ripple, like heat waves off hot asphalt, except it wasn't heat. It tilted its head once, just slightly, and the whistle stopped. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat. I didn't run, didn't move, just stood there, frozen, until dawn broke. When I returned to headquarters, I submitted my recordings, photographs, and detailed field notes. My supervisors reviewed the evidence and concluded that what I'd documented were acoustic mirages caused by thermal inversion layers along the bluffs. My photos were dismissed as motion blur exacerbated by fog and low light conditions. I might have accepted their explanation, might have convinced myself that's all it was. But 2 weeks later, a tourist disappeared near that same ridge. The search team found deep gouges in the clay and recorded those same 4 notes on their radio transmissions. They never found the missing hiker. I resigned my commission shortly after. 14 years of service ended by something I still can't explain. Before I left, I recorded one final message on the park's backcountry permit voicemail system. A warning: if you hear whistling where no one should be, don't answer it. The locals have stories about it. Old Smoky Mountain superstitions about whistling after dark calling something to you. They call it the Whistler. Say it travels the ridge trails at dusk, luring hikers off the marked paths. Some claim it's been there since before the park was established, that it's part of the mountains themselves. I don't know what it is. Don't know if it's a creature or something else entirely. All I know is what I saw, what I heard, and what happened to that hiker. And I know this: these mountains are listening. When they whistle to you, they're not calling for help. They're hunting.